Yes, welcome back. You're still watching Power Breakfast right here on Citizen TV, and it's that time to take a look at what is headlining on the dailies and other news outlets. This morning we're privileged to have Kabando Kabando, MP Mukurweine. Next to him we have Chris Wamalwa, MP from Kiminini, and Muthomi Njuki, MP Chuka Egamba Ng'ombe. Now, just to elaborate further, Muthomi Njuki is a candidate for governor for Tharaka Nithi County. Chris Wamalwa is seeking to defend his seat as the MP for Kiminini on a Ford Kenya ticket, and Kabando just a week after conceding in the Jubilee Party primaries, withdrew that concession and now will defend his Mukurweine parliamentary seat as an independent candidate. I got it right? Very right. Yes. You did. Yeah, and probably let's start there, because there's been a lot of talk about what happened. You considered defeat. Then what informed your change of heart? Because yes, there are those who disputed from the word go and said no, the process was not fair, and but you considered, just like Governor William Kabogo considered as well. Then a week or two later, you say no, I'm still in the race.
Thank you very much, and good morning, gentlemen, and good morning, viewers. Very happy to be back here. When you go driving classes, you are taught that only a foolish driver does not reverse. You must be judicious in life, and based on empirical evidence, research, you get scientific findings, you can review. Only a fool does not review decisions on a realization that the ground on which you stand is shaky and can't withstand, because there is a foundation which was misplaced. And therefore, yes, indeed, I never took any complaint to the party. I never went to the party's tribunal. I just made a singular bold decision that, based on the findings that I received upon commissioning some work to be done post the nominations, I had no other alternative than to go back to my people. First, to satisfy them that indeed their democratic choice is made based on reality. Number two, to also satisfy myself that indeed I'm not submitting to whims of corruption, whims of manipulations, and I should not accept to be a victim of forces that are adversarial to the democratic gains that we are making in this country.
And so we'll be discussing that, because the words forces, that particular word has been used a lot, especially with regard to the Jubilee Party primaries, that apparently there could have been some forces. And one of the headlines seems to suggest the same, that apparently there could have been some forces. Some of the MPs who lost out at the party primaries have accused one or two people of being behind their loss. We'll be discussing that headline in a short while. Of course, the biggest headline is Uhuru now seeks 370 billion shillings more to extend SGR project from the initial Mombasa, Nairobi, now to Naivasha to Kisumu. We'll be looking at that as well. But I want us to start with this story here on the front page of the Daily Nation. It's been highlighted there, but it's on page 11. MPs risk losing their Porsche cars over debt. Parliament warns it will recover all outstanding loans just before the general elections. Now, today we're only having members of the National Assembly, so this story affects you directly. 100 broke MPs risk losing luxury cars. Nearly 100 MPs are facing possible repossession of their luxury cars to recover outstanding loans at the end of their tenure on August 7th. This is according to the Parliamentary Service Commission. The MPs, fresh from spending millions of shillings in the just concluded party primaries and expecting to spend more in the upcoming campaigns, are under immense pressure to clear low-cost mortgage and car loans advanced during their term in office. Now, we do understand that MPs get car grants once you get into the National Assembly, and this is it's a non-refundable 5 million shilling grant you're given, and you get to buy a car of your choice. So how come we're seeing this 4 or 5 years later that they're still grappling, some of them struggling to actually clear this loan, some of them, we do understand, at very low interest rates?
Are you the most broke?
Have you cleared your
Well, your choice.
your commitments to Parliament?
No. It's true that I've not cleared. I have a loan which I'm servicing, and the way it's calculated in Parliament, it's calculated in a way that by the end of your term,
Yes.
you should have cleared. Actually, members of Parliament, when you look at their payslip, some came from outside Nairobi. Maybe they want to home in a house. I thank God I already had a house in Nairobi before I went into politics, so I didn't have that much stress of going maybe for that particular mortgage. But it's true, when that facility is there, we do use it, and I don't think this issue of saying 100 broke MPs, because it's calculated in a way that before the end of the term you should have cleared, and it's true. We get it at a low interest rate of 3% per annum, and this is because looking at the terrain, because these cars, they go all the way to the constituency, and you need a strong car that can maybe be able to contain the roads. Our roads, as you know, somewhere very far, you need a very strong car. As a member of Parliament, you have two offices. We have one at the constituency where you have to go meet your people, and we have another one in Nairobi. So the way that our jobs are, you need a strong car, a car that can be able to last. Because when you look at the mileage of the vehicles, you can't believe it.
Yes.
Because you're ever on the movement, you're ever up and down.
But
so
the concern probably is why are, if at all it's calculated to actually, for you to be able to complete your repayments within your term, and I'm assuming that's the one term, then how come there's this threat of repossession? It means some of the MPs are not able to meet that commitment.
Who has talked about that?
This is the Parliamentary Service Commission.
You know what I'm trying to say? My brother Mudomi would agree, and also Omar, as much as you want to talk about this matter is between an employer and the employee. Just like you don't talk about the debt owed to other private companies, it's politicization. Let me finish. It's politicization. If I owe anyone, and particularly my employer, the arrangement is between me and my employer, right? My employer has rules, has methods, they have systems, and so we are trying to let's address more serious issues.
No, we will not avoid this headline, Kabando, because it's there.
I'm only saying
because the concern is
it is sensational.
Yes, it could be sensational, but the concern is, and most members of Parliament have raised this concern, that perhaps the job of a member of Parliament, most members of Parliament are overburdened by the demands of their constituents, and sometimes when you leave Parliament, some of those who are not able to come back as legislators end up living very miserable lives. Could this be part of what is contributing to that? That once you're not able to go back to the National Assembly, you still have these obligations to meet, then you become a burden even to your constituents because you can no longer afford this kind of lifestyle.
Well, I would want to echo the words of Kabando. In that I personally think that that headline is based on what Parliamentary Service Commission want to use as populist politics. In that the money that is given to members of Parliament as a loan is taxpayers' money. Definitely. It's supposed to assist the members of Parliament to be able to buy cars at cheaper interest rates so they can be able to reach their people. However, I want to remind you that this loan is not, it has no collateral except the car that you're buying.
Yes.
And therefore, for you to be able to give that kind of a loan, there must be a calculation and assurance that since your term ends after 5 years, the calculation should be such that you should be able to finish your payment before the 5 years. If anyone did that miscalculation in the name of PIC, then somebody should be very responsible, because it will be wasting taxpayers' money.
Okay. And the risk is only repossession
of that car. Some of those cars are fully worn out. You might be thinking the members of Parliament have very good cars at the end of 5 years. Those roads and the places you travel, the mileage, some of those cars are totally worn out, as per se. And therefore, even though there's another reason for them not to worry at all, because members of Parliament have other benefits that they are supposed to get before they exit, gratuity and other encumbrances.
This could affect that?
Not really affect that. That they have so much they can actually be able to to use to recover the loan.
Yes.
That they should not be worrying about this.
Okay.
Yes.
Either way, it is in the headlines, page 11 of the Daily Nation. 100 broke MPs risk losing luxury cars. That's the headline as it reads. You can get that story, read it for yourself on page 11 of the Daily Nation. Let's now come to this main story. Uhuru now seeks 370 billion shillings more to extend the SGR project now to Kisumu. Now, the initial amount spent on the first phase of the railway between Mombasa and Nairobi was 327 billion shillings. Now, President Uhuru Kenyatta is in China and is looking for an additional Chinese loan to extend the railway from Naivasha to Kisumu. Now, this could push the president's pet project to 847 billion shillings worth. Now, the issue is about the debt, because when we were reading the budget, of course, we looked so much at how much Kenya's foreign borrowing has gone. 3.8 trillion shillings of national debt. Now, this one, do you think it's timely at this time that we could be going for this when actually things are not that easy? Couldn't we have waited a bit more? Or probably, you know, during election time, a lot happens. Why couldn't we have waited a little bit longer just before getting another loan to extend this project?
Thank you very much. It's very important to appreciate that for any nation to grow, you must invest long term. Just like the savings that we make in our local circles, the villages, the chamas. You put in money and expect that that money can be from the seed capital, can be borrowed by any of the members. The Kenya Incorporated, look at it as a private enterprise where all the citizens are shareholders. If you look at the stories of nations that went ahead of us, you mentioned the Eastern Asia tigers, you know, talk about Malaysia, talk about Singapore, talk about South Korea. You make long-term investments, and that investment significantly involves infrastructure involvement. You know, the headline says Uhuru now seeks 370 billion more to extend the standard gauge railway project. That means it's extending all the way to the border. It's going all the way to the western part of the republic. It's touching Kisumu. It means upgrading to extend, to upgrade the infrastructure.
The concern is
when we are doing the Thika highway, super highway, there are people who are still raising questions. We are here by 6, but I can tell you, those who live in Juja or in a Thika town, even with the expansion of the Thika superhighway, if it is past 6 a.m., you take about maybe another hour and a half or 2 to get to the Royal Media Services Center. Look at what is happening in Gong Road. Look at what is happening on Mombasa Road. Expansion of infrastructure is a core investment that is very clearly captured in our Vision 2030 agenda. And that means that we are only complying with our vision to move forward.
Now, when Chris Omalo, of course, the Jubilee government, the Jubilee administration has been accused of irresponsible borrowing, that they're going beyond what we should borrow. Some of it may not be necessary at this time, because that's a feeling that, yes, Kenyans are already facing difficult times. Why go out and borrow more? Do you think this was timely? Or do you think this kind of approach is timely?
This is totally wrong. I think the Jubilee government is getting things upside down. It is true it is important to improve infrastructure, but you must do something called cost-benefit analysis. Right now, this country is struggling in terms of payment, the foreign debts. The Kibaki government, when he left power, he had borrowed up to 800 billion, and that is for the 2 terms of 10 years. The Jubilee government, within 4 years, it had gone 4 times. We're talking of even 5 times. We're talking of 3.8 trillion. And this is a burden to the Kenyans. And the only way the government can pay back is through taxation. This is the same way you go borrow money, but you cannot sustain the debt. So these guys of saying we are extending, this is wrong, particularly when it comes to timing. I have no doubt that part of this money may be intended for other purposes. And let me tell you one thing. This SGR issue, when you look at the costing compared to Ethiopia, you know, it's single lane compared to Ethiopia, and do a comparative analysis, you find that the costing of this railway is exaggerated, is more expensive, and where the money is going to the cartels, issues of corruption. I sit in the PIC committee, we've sat with him, and we've seen this documentary evidence coming in when you do a comparative analysis. It is true, it is good to improve the infrastructure, but at what cost? Yes. Not at inflated cost. Right now, Kenyans are crying the cost of living, and the SGR is part and parcel of this contribution to the cost of living. Because when you borrow excessively or irresponsibly, that means your payback, monthly payback or yearly, it is high. And for you to be able to sustain that installments of payback, you need to tax Kenyans. So you are forced to tax Kenyans more in terms of taxes and duty. And the implication of this on the commodities, the price is going to be high. So the issue here, the irresponsible borrowing, is what we are talking against. And this issue, the inflation rate at the moment, we are talking of 12%. That's why Kenyans are crying in terms of the cost of living, because the public debt that the irresponsible Jubilee government has been borrowing, it is the one causing all this. So we are telling His Excellency the President, listen to me, Your Excellency, we respect you. It's a wonderful idea to improve infrastructure, but the timing, you must do a proper feasibility study. Right now what Kenyans are crying is the ugali on the table, but not the issue of extending irresponsibly so that money will be going through corruption.
The first phase of the SGR is yet to be launched. The real economic value of that particular infrastructure is yet to be felt. Why go ahead and borrow more at this time? Well, shouldn't we have waited at least to see this first phase, how it will operate, some of the challenges that will come with it, some of the projections that could come from it, then we see, okay, fine, yes, let's extend.
First and foremost, allow me to say that I am not disappointed. I'm used to the populist, petty, partisan politics from the NASA coalition. I'm not surprised that Chris' remarks ended up with the issue of the ugali, because instead of seeking answers to issues and giving you know, very well calibrated comments about our development record, he has to link it to politics, you know, always, and that is the biggest problem. And that even when the government is doing something that is going to be of value to us, we, in this time of politics, we always have to castigating Jubilee coalition. Let me come to answering your question, and I want to totally ignore what Chris has said. But first and foremost, Chris has no proof that the Kenyan economy is struggling with the debt. I have not seen that as yet, where we are told that we have been unable to pay this debt and that we are going to be auctioned, or that we are taxing people more.
When the budget was being read, the IMF and the World Bank came back and said there was a report that said that yes, Kenya is tinkering.
Absolutely.
On the possibility of defaulting.
On the possibility of defaulting. But we want to hear where that evidence that Kenya has defaulted and that we're being auctioned for not paying debt. And I want to tell you, I want to first of all hail Uhuru Kenyatta for one very good reason. When people are busy really focusing on campaigns, he looks perturbed, and he has stood up as the president of the country rather than the candidate for Jubilee. That he is still just a few days to end of his term, first term, he is still out there working for Kenyans, and that he has seen a very good reason for not having a project that is more or less like I would say a hanging project. If you do an SGR from Mombasa to Nairobi, because the real value is supposed to be linking our neighbors to be able to do trade with them. We want Uganda to be able to import through Kenya, through Mombasa, and not Dar es Salaam, and therefore there is all need to ensure that this SGR gets the border of Uganda, so that we can be able to have full utilization and benefits from the SGR in having more people using it, and the economy growing because of course what they pay to be able to use it really, and of course using the transport in this case. I like your question about why don't we wait first to see whether it will have some benefits that come with it, because it's been built up in Nairobi. But
because there must have been some reasoning behind that. Let's do the first phase.
Yes, should you really be, because you know what the costs that come with the part implementation of a project, because we have contractors on site, for example. We do have issues that have been brought together in that whole concession, that if they're broken apart, we are going to have a problem in having to bring them back, and also high cost of having to implement them in parts. And I want to cite the issue of the Ethiopia that he's referring to every other time. In Ethiopia, the land is owned by the government, and therefore nobody in Ethiopia compensates you for bringing the SGR through your farm, even sometimes through your house. But in Kenya, land is owned by individuals, and therefore you cannot take SGR through farms of people without having to compensate them. And actually, if you look at the costs of SGR, a bulk of it, a very big chunk of it has been money that goes to compensating the people for the land, which is totally different from what we have in Ethiopia. And it is part and parcel of our culture, and of course our democracy in the country.
Do you see a risk with the huge borrowing at this time, given that the national debt is already at 3.8 trillion shillings, and I think they've even broken it down to say that every Kenyan right now owes 18,000 shillings. Yes, 18,413
I'll be worried if we were borrowing I would be very worried if we were borrowing to pay salaries or buy food or be able to sustain sports and things like those. But if you are borrowing for a project that is really you know,
if you compare between this administration and Mwai Kibaki's administration, the one right before it, that particular administration managed to build quite a number of roads, and the borrowing didn't go
very well.
Yes.
Let's come there.
Yes.
You know, there's a serious contradiction when you talk about the Kibaki one. That's Kibaki 2003 to 2007. Everyone, even those who disagreed with him, and they had the serious fallout in 2005 November after the orange banana referendum, they all say that Kibaki one did very well. Indeed, no one forgets that even the famous Bill Clinton, former president of the United States of America, mentioned on a very prominent radio show, TV show, that he wanted to visit one man in the African continent because of his gains for the children of his country, the universal free primary education. Okay, and again, many countries traveled to Kenya from outside Africa and from within Africa because of the revolution of devolution through CDF. Okay, but still, in the 2007 elections, the same individuals who are leading the brigade to complain and lament now were calling CDF takataka, and they were saying that nothing has been done, including the security overhaul that were done.
But away from politics.
No, because it's politics. It's pure politics, nothing than more pure politics. Now, after Kibaki one, because he's gone, Kibaki one is gone, we talked about how successful he was. Then we had Kibaki two. Kibaki two shared government with the ODM. Every time ODM brigade is standing, because the rest are just affiliates, subsidiaries, the main mover of the criticism of the current Jubilee administration is ODM. The others are just you know, flower girls. Because you must hit politics with politics. Now, every time they are standing, led by their man, Raila, they say, all the Jubilee projects are not the initiatives of Jubilee. They are the GRAD coalition projects. They want to claim credit. With due respect, they want to claim credit on this project long after Uhuru is gone. And very possibly in 2022. These guys who are complaining and lamenting will say, indeed, we had a visionary president who laid the foundation for Kenya to be a Malaysia, a Singapore, a South Korea.
The concern, Kabando, is if we compare the two administrations and the kind of debt each incurred in as far as working out the infrastructure projects. Mwai Kibaki and his administration, they worked out a few things. quite a number of things, including Thika Superhighway, but the kind of debt that that administration incurred in comparison to the current administration.
Is that a question or a position?
That is the question I'm asking.
Thank you.
How did the other administration manage to do that without incurring so much debt?
Thank you very much. I think I don't want to be sycophantic like my friend Honorable Kabando. You know, he's going independent, but the mind, the way he's reasoning, you can see that aspect of sycophancy, maybe for sympathy from the Nyeri people or whatever. But now, running away from that, let me just focus on this. When you do a comparative analysis between the Kibaki regime and Uhuru regime, it's totally different. The difference is like day and night. And I want to tell Kenyans how the Kibaki government managed to do this without much borrowing. One, the government raises its revenue through taxation. We don't have any other means, or maybe getting grants. And if this money is being used efficiently and effectively, when you look at the level of corruption at the Kibaki regime compared to this regime, I think Kibaki tried as much as possible to minimize the element of wastage through corruption. If you ask any small child anywhere, what is the legacy of Jubilee government? They'll tell you it's corruption. Everywhere it's corruption. But when you go back to Kibaki government, there are two critical things. When Kibaki government took over power, the economy of this country was in ICU. The GDP growth was at a negative. You remember it came up with the ERS, the Economic Recovery Strategy. Then from Economic Recovery Strategy, where it was the main objective was wealth creation and employment. From there, it went to the Vision 2030, which is a very good strategic move. When you look at this Jubilee government, they no longer align their activities even to the Vision 2030. They don't mention about it. So the issue of the Jubilee government, the issue is excessive borrowing. You are borrowing so much because a lot is going into wastage in terms of corruption. So it's not being used. A small percentage, like this 370 billion, a small percentage is the one going to the projects. A lot that is being wasted through corruption. This is the burden to the Kenyans in terms of payback. So the difference here is this. Kibaki managed to improve KRA in terms of revenue collection. That's why he came up with a slogan, Kulipa ushuru ni kujitegemea. So that you don't rely excessively on external borrowing. And he had put systems in place that whatever little you are going to get, it is going to the projects. So you borrow less. But with this Jubilee government, it has gone it's on fire when it comes to issues of borrowing. So a lot is being wasted. A lot is being wasted.
Just a comparison.
Let me finish. A lot is being wasted going through corruption. And if you borrow excessively, paying, it becomes very difficult to sustain. Right now, every Kenyan you can see, you have a debt of 18,000. Now with this one coming in 370 billion, can you imagine from Mombasa to Nairobi, the estimated was 200 something. Then from here to Kisumu, which is a shorter distance, is almost doubling. So the problem we have with the Jubilee government is the issue of corruption, excessive borrowing, you know, which is giving change and it's contributing to inflation and the cost of living now.
Even if we were to look ahead and say that William Ruto replaces or succeeds President Uhuru Kenyatta as president, we would still compare those two administrations despite the fact that they come from the same Jubilee. Yes, and that's what I wanted us to do here. Yes, despite political affiliations, if we could compare the previous regime and the one now, and how that one worked without borrowing this much, what is the difference? How did that particular administration manage to do that?
Well, you look at the backgrounds and where we are coming from. First and foremost, you cannot compare the two in terms of borrowing if you do not compare the projects that they are doing. Kibaki just did the superhighway, which is actually the mega project, and a few roads. Well, but if you compare to what Uhuru Kenyatta is doing with his administration, you cannot compare the value of standard gauge railway, the one of the superhighway. Looking at the technology, the cost implications, the distance, you know, the length of the whole thing. They are totally different. And secondly, it is also important to note that it is wrong for you to borrow money for the country, which will be paid by taxpayers, and then use all of it on something that is not business. And I'm very surprised when Chris says that like 370 billion most of it will go to corruption, because this is a creation of the mind. It's a perception, you know, it's something that a concept, something that they want to create and pump it to Kenyans about the corruption issue. Because as much as corruption has been there since time immemorial, and there are systems and agencies that constantly deal with it. It is not a sole creation of the Jubilee government that has come up with the corruption. That it has been there, but they choose to focus on the negative and not look at any positive that the Jubilee has done.
So you feel the projects under Mwai Kibaki were much smaller?
They were much smaller,
yes,
in smaller scale, and of course, as far as the issue of borrowing is concerned, I want to remind you that Kibaki's government borrowed a lot from the local market. If you look at the treasury bills that time, the interest rates for the loans, it was very high, because he borrowed so much from the commercial bank. It is true. If you look at the interest rates, Kabando is the truth. If you look at the interest rates during Mwai Kibaki's government, the interest rates for the loans was 24%, 25%, and even before we capped the interest rate at 14%. I did have a loan at 25%. Before we capped the loan interest at 14%, it had come down to around 18-17%. Why? Because the Jubilee government was not borrowing heavily from the local market, and that is one of the things that we overlook that happened to the Mwananchi, that they were able to afford loans and be able to develop themselves, even as the country is developing itself.
Okay, Bwana Kabando, do you agree that yes, the difference is that Mwai Kibaki's administration actually engaged in much smaller projects as compared to Uhuru Kenyatta's?
When Kibaki was giving his farewell speech at Kasarani at the inauguration of Uhuru Kenyatta, he indeed accepted that Uhuru is a dynamic duo. Kibaki had problems. In his first, in Kibaki 1, he started problems in 2003, around July, barely 7 months into his administration, and had a lot of difficulties for 3 years until November 20th, when he went to the referendum, Orange Banana, and he had to collapse his cabinet and get a grand coalition government, you know, the government of national unity rather. Okay, so we wasted a lot of time, and at that time, the individuals who are now praising Kibaki abused Kibaki, fought Kibaki, had serious fallouts. In the second administration of Kibaki, he had a shared government. Again, through violence, bloodshed, displacements, and death, we were compelled to have a grand coalition government through negotiations with Kofi Annan. So I find it contradictory, and I think what you should be asking, are we opposed? Can NASA people come up and say we are opposed to this money coming to Kenya, 370 billion, to do Naivasha Kisumu standard gauge railway? And can we also say that when you are driving on Moyale Masabit Road, when we have when women are going through free maternity care, when our children at standard 8 at Form 4 are enjoying exam free fees, when a reduction of secondary school fees has been significantly reduced, when we have the National Hospital Insurance Fund being extended, and with the promissory of Kenyans of 70 years and above receiving a stipend.
But surely,
so because we must, as a country, in 2002, before we went to the elections, there was a global survey that indeed indicated, and truly so, that Kenyans are a very resilient and optimistic community. We must ponder and ask ourselves as national leaders, whether we are in the coalitions of opposition or in the coalition of the ruling government, whether we want to pump Kenyans, we want to perpetrate, we want to dominate negativities at all times. Is there something good that can come from the mouths of NASA functionaries and their supporters that is happening under Uhuru Kenyatta?
Yes,
indeed. Indeed.
30 seconds.
Indeed. If we have the courage to today praise Kibaki that we fought from 2002 to 2013, we must also ask ourselves in retrospect.
But we need to ask ourselves, is this the only way to achieve this kind of
investment? Let me finish. Investment, as I said initially, if you want to do a business, if you want to do an enterprise, you save now, you invest now for tomorrow. If you are borrowing from a commercial bank or financial institution or from wherever for dividends, you don't harvest tomorrow. And if you want to start a story, and I'm inviting these individuals to read about Singapore, to read about Dr. Mahmoud of Malaysia and others, to see what they did in a generation. How to move a country from a third world to a first world in a generation. You must take serious leadership risk.
We're about to go on a break, but I'll give you one more.
Yeah, because I have two Jubilee guys here, but I'll manage them objectively.
We'll
give me more time. The issue is this. I've heard so much about Singapore in terms of Lee Kuan Yew. What the Jubilee government is doing, I want to compare it to Uchumi Supermarket. Uchumi Supermarket went into excessive expansion without looking at how it's going to manage the net working capital. In the long run, what happened? It was collapsing. So it had to consolidate the extensive expansion of those supermarkets that were not getting returns on the investment. If Jubilee government, whatever my friend has mentioned, has done well, we have something called the end result. And the end result here is to improve the cost of living. That's the only indicator to tell you that your investments, you've done them properly. But in the long run, excessive borrowing, what's happening? It's a burden to a common mwananchi. And this is where the public debt comes in. You've not been borrowing wisely. I'm comparing it to Uchumi Supermarket. Where did it go to? Fred. It went borrowing all over and it collapsed. Fred, this is what's happening to Jubilee. The public debt has gone responsibly high.
Just 10 seconds. Just 10 seconds. 10 seconds.
They should also give me 10.
If today you were given money by a bank to do a slaughterhouse for yourself, and then 90% the slaughter was not ready, would you just decide to be auctioned and keep quiet? You'll go back to the same bank, borrow, so that you can be able to complete the slaughterhouse and be able to pay back the loan. At the moment, hanging SGR up to Nairobi does not serve the purpose. We need to extend it to Uganda, so that to Kisumu and Uganda, so that you can actually have to have full benefit for it.
Okay, let's now take a break. We'll be back to discuss a lot more headlines. Remember, imported maize in surplus is surplus from old stock from South Africa. That's the other headline, and more than 17,000 to fight for seats in the next elections. That when Power Breakfast returns.